All right, today is the anniversary of one of the, I guess, largest in terms of the number of people involved, largest staged events since 9/11, which would be January 6th. They must have had at least 2,000 actors that day. And I've been speculating about the director. You know, who is behind. I mean, we know that these things are orchestrated by multiple agencies, but when it comes to the creative direction, art direction, who wrote the script? Who wrote the scenes? Who directed the death of Ashley Babbitt? And we've done comprehensive breakdowns of all the various characters involved. Ashley Babbitt, for example, the name Babbitt likely a reference to The Babbitts by Upton Sinclair. Likely some kind of, I don't know if it was a dig, but a characterization of this woman wrapped quite literally in an American flag, trying to run through the door before she got shot. And she got shot in the neck, by the way. Now, am I right? Is she the only legitimate, like, patriot death? Like, she's their official martyr. Trump beamed in by TV on her posthumous birthday. Her mother's an activist for it, so, you know, she's a part of the psyop. But anyway, Ashley Babbitt got shot in the neck. They didn't have a really good squib, though. That was no Charlie Kirk. You know, it wasn't like a gushing wound. It didn't have that kind of shock value. In fact, funnily enough, Woo's News did a breakdown of it, and you don't even see any blood until like a moment later, and it seems like the squib malfunctioned. So anyway, Ashley Babbitt was shot in the neck. And what does she symbolize? Well, Turning Point USA. Make America great again. This nostalgia, Americana, let's turn things back. The traditionalist, or the, quote, you know, the opposite of the progressive. This attempt to pull back before civil rights, before feminism, etc. If you look at the far right, and even the moderate right, their views. So what does Ashley Babbitt represent in all of this? Well, again, wrapped in the American flag, an attempt to take back something they thought was stolen. She's wrapped in the flag and then gets, again, shot in the neck. So there's something very similar here. There's some kind of analogy here, I think, with Charlie Kirk in Turning Point USA and the symbol of the neck wound. Maybe a symbol of censorship or silence or just the execution of something. Like, I was looking at that show Americana, where the guy gets shot by an arrow on the left side of the neck. And I was like, well, that's what Kirk represented, the death of Americana. So Ashley Babbitt in that context. There's got to be some symbolic value to that particular injury. And there was some influencer who went up there, and you see him crying outside, and he's like waving his hands around. He's like, look at the blood on my hands. You did this. Because he had, as he claimed that he caught Ashley Babbitt as she fell to her death. But if you look at the breakdown of it frame by frame, that's not what happened. She was on the ground. And by the way, she had this massive backpack on, like some kind of, I think it was like an inflatable pad or some kind of foam, so she could land on her back like a stunt woman. So this influencer claims he held her, caught her, and she bled on him. Not true. The squib was malfunctioning. He saw her go down because he was in the room, but as the video revealed, he merely knelt down for a second and touched her. Like, he tapped his hand in the blood. Afterwards, he goes outside and he embellishes quite a lot. Anyway, it was all actors, all feds, all staged, and Ashley Babbitt's death, even if you look at the video, has a indication of a jump cut. So it may have been even filmed in advance. We don't know. And if you think you do, what are your sources? So Ashley Babbitt is the official J6 martyr, and that, again, that was 5 years ago today. 5 years ago today, we watched this thing with the QAnon shaman, you know, dressed up in the animal skins, probably smelling like roadkill, with a spear running into the Capitol. We watched this whole thing unfold and thought it was laughable. Like, what a joke. I mean, leftists have often swarmed states' capitals. It's not like a new thing necessarily. But the way that, and then also, this was also following the summer of 2020. So we saw progressive peaceful protesters with fire, real destruction, beatings, innocent passerbyers having their car windows smashed. We watched all that stuff go down to where by the end of the summer of 2020, many of us were cheering whenever people would run over protesters. We were like, oh, good job, DeSantis. Make it legal to run over these mobs. Because the mob has to be tamed. And you can't kowtow to the pressure of a group, intellectually or physically. And there's a power disparity, and I'm like, okay. Like, I lost all sympathy for them after a certain point, because they were just there to loot and I don't know what else. Just mainly it's just an outlet for people who are destructive. But we were just really, I think, wary of riots at that time. So when the J6ers do it, it was lightweight. It was almost comical. In fact, we found it to be comical, so much so that we created a South Pole episode about it, which got us banned. Right after J6, and this is frequent, whenever there's a big psychological operation, a big hoax that they want everybody to buy into, one of the things they do is they really control the speech, the interpretation afterward. And in this case, just by talking about it and calling it a hoax, we had our DLive account pulled. And that was a 24/7 live stream that earned on average $1 per hour, which may not sound like a lot, but 168 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, it paid for the operations. That's why we were able to produce so many of those cartoons. But J6 resulted in, or our criticism of it, resulted in that being pulled. I was highly disappointed, and I never regained respect for that particular platform. And the only reason I even stream there at all is I do have a number of people who use that app. Okay, so to get back on topic here, anniversary of J6, it just occurred to me, Ashley Babbitt was shot in the neck. We probably need to consider that as part of this story of the Turner Diaries come to life. Ribo Nation says, agent provocateurs escalate the chaos on both sides. Exactly. And okay, I'm working on a new whiteboard. So if you're not a member, I would suggest joining, and I will be uploading these to Substack. I'm working on a new whiteboard on the concept of the non. Because people reflexively, out of discernment, they recognize lies and bullshit, and they may reflexively go to the other side. And those who are in control know this, so they create the other side. It's very simple. And there will never be a reconciliation between left and right because they are being triangulated against one another by the third party, the monolithic control system itself. So the pro is obviously wrong, and it's the side of the establishment. And the anti side is like, oh no, we're against the establishment. We're against the mainstream. Mainstream media's lies. Okay, well, that sounds insightful, but it's actually not. Because the anti and the pro are both controlled by the establishment. Again, it's a triangulation. So if you're an anti in any position, you're just as bad as the pro. And I've been saying this for some time, but then people say, well, what's the option? Because there's this thinking, oh, if you're not anti this agenda, you're therefore in support of it, either explicitly or tacitly. Like, oh, if you're not anti, you're actually just by not being against it. Like the concept of anti-racism, for example. This is a tactic used to get you to take a choice in a binary when there might be other options. Like, oh, it's not enough to not be in the debate. You have to take a stance against the thing. Like, aren't you against AIDS? Wear the AIDS ribbon. Like, oh, if you're not wearing an AIDS ribbon right now, then you're for AIDS. No, I'm not for AIDS. I just don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon. Like Kramer in that Seinfeld clip. You need to look it up, Kramer and the AIDS ribbon. Because that's how cultists are. They beat the crap out of him. He was at an AIDS parade, raising money for it, even. But since he wouldn't wear the ribbon, because he's some kind of a nonconformist, they jumped him. Which is pretty funny. The show's, that clip is one of the best. So the people who are anti are just like the mob who beat up Kramer. So I'm like, okay, look, this is the other position. Non. Are you, like, I don't drink Pepsi or any sugary drink. Am I anti-Pepsi? No. No. I'm not really pro-Pepsi. I mean, I don't care what other people do with it. But I'm not anti-Pepsi because I don't drink it. I'm not anti-smoking because I don't smoke cigarettes. So then what am I? Well, I'm a non-smoker. I'm a non-Pepsi drinker. So the non-position is valid. And it represents the alternative to a controlled binary. So instead of being pro or anti, be non. And by non, you're saying, I don't have enough information necessarily to conclude that the pro or anti is 100% correct, and so I'm going to remain objective. And when you look at how these polarized issues and platforms are advanced, if it was based solely on facts and reason, they wouldn't use certain propaganda techniques to persuade you. Anonymous says that Kramer versus, yeah, exactly. Well, it was more than just Kramer against the AIDS marchers. It wasn't about AIDS necessarily. It was about groupthink, I think. And this idea that you can't just be a non. You can't just step outside of their, it's kind of like they're extorting you. Like you must choose a side. It's a no-win situation. The individual is required to sacrifice themselves for the collective. And this has been a reoccurring theme lately. The mayor of New York getting sworn in the subway like some Gotham underlord. I mean, that's crazy right there. The symbolism there is pretty intense. But he's like, we must eradicate I don't know what he called it, the scourge of rugged individualism, and replace it with collectivism. And that sounds like pluribus, where the alien virus turns humanity into a hive mind, and the entirety of humanity, with one singular consciousness, is trying to influence the protagonist to join them. It's like that Richard Matheson book that really kicked off the whole zombie genre, The Last Man on Earth. And I don't know if you've read it. It's actually really good. So I like a lot of Richard Matheson's work, and I think Stephen King borrows a lot of the guy's ideas. But in The Last Man on Earth, it's a vampire bat virus. So you got the bat story already. Now, when we start doing our predictive programming breakdown, we could probably start the 2020 PSYOP with Richard Matheson's The Last Man on Earth, because it's about quarantine. So what he does is he's the only man on Earth who has not caught the vampire bat virus, and everybody's been turned into vampires. So by day, he fortifies his house, he gets supplies, and he hunts the sleeping vampires down. He kills them in their sleep. And then he goes back, and then during the night, he drinks and he blasts classical music and he defends his fortress against them. And spoiler alert, he is the last man on Earth, and the world becomes taken over by vampires. So when they finally get rid of him, he declares himself a legend. I Am Legend. Actually, the book's called I Am Legend. The movie version is Last Man on Earth. But I Am Legend is a reference to the fact that he became like Dracula. Like as Dracula is to humans, he was the killer of vampires. He was the thing they feared, that he would come for them in their sleep. So it's like this inversion thing. But anyway, this zombie theme, collectivism, the masses versus the individual, it's a reoccurring theme. And throughout 2020, it was always brought up that the most dangerous person would be the healthy super spreader. The individual can threaten the collective. One person can destroy an entire system. One guy didn't properly heat up his bowl of bat soup, and we all got screwed. And they've been making the same exact case in many other contexts. Like Elon Musk is going to destroy space. Elon Musk destroyed cyberspace. So we're talking about commons, global commons, being destroyed by the actions of single selfish individuals. And I'm about 8 episodes. I've been binging on it. I'm about 8 episodes into Pluribus. And if you haven't seen it, I happen to think Albuquerque has some of the best, I don't know if New Mexico in general, just has really great lighting. And the skies here they just come off as very vivid. And it really shows in Breaking Bad and in this particular show. I think that's why Netflix has an office here. I think there's a lot of film activity here because of the lighting. But anyway, I'm 8 episodes into Pluribus, and it really makes the case that this intransigent, stubborn, selfish individual is holding up progress, is preventing the entire collective from uniting and becoming one. And if you remember the guilt trip that they used in 2020, the nonconformists, the ones who aren't going along with the program, are just prolonging the situation. The individual is a hindrance to the success of the collective. They can't just have their own separate thing. They need everybody to convert. So this theme, this collectivist theme, seems also to be apparent in the new upcoming Steven Spielberg. This is certainly the case with, I think it was, there's so many movies now where the alien's represented as not physical, but as something that comes through either some kind of a virus, like Pluribus, it's a virus. And so the virus idea is still one of these things where it's tied into the whole zombie thing. It's always been connected with the collective, because one person can destroy an entire group. The entire group needs to be protected from it. Auto Hoaxer GTFO says, inner city blue-collar workers are pleased by Trump's conquest of Venezuela, a real touch-grass moment, because I'd have guessed the anti-imperialism would have been the vibe. Yeah, I've seen a lot of memes where they're like, no more wars. And then, and then this happens. It's crazy. MAGA doesn't have any principles. Like the whole MAGA group, they're in it for power. Trump is not a limited government conservative or a reformer like they said. No, this is just, it's all just state worship, state power, and each side is fighting over who's going to be in control of the power. And they want the right to abuse the power. And they get off on it. They really do. They cheer this stuff when they hear of excesses or Trump's behaving in a way that's unpresidential. They see it as a flex. Like, we'll show those Democrats. No one has the moral high ground. Like George Bernard Shaw wrote, never wrestle with the pig because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. Like, that's what we're looking at. The world stage doesn't have any, like, angels. It's not like good versus evil. What's up, Cubstar? Thank you for joining. Yeah, I'm kind of hanging out here. I'm running errands, and I'm getting labels. I'm about to go into the library and print some labels out. So if you ordered the books, you'll be getting those tracking numbers shortly. Handbook for the recently deprogrammed. And I'm working on a series of whiteboards that will be required for me to, I think, to break down the sections for noobs. Because if I go do a book reading, and that's what I'm working on next, the promotion, I don't want to alienate people with jargon or start off from a perspective that is so foreign that they just don't get it. So I'm breaking down each of the sections into a simple 10-minute or less synopsis. So the first whiteboard I did was breaking down the timeline of the programming, how past, present, future correlates to history, news, and pre-scheduled fake events, and how these are, through the art of theater, basically psyop theater, they are introduced into our timeline, and how we in fact have two timelines. We all have the real one. It's 2026. In fact, I was looking at some stuff online. I'll have to get into it, but someone broke down something where they said that this is the 6,000th year since creation, according to some biblical timelines. I'm not a believer in that stuff, but I think it's interesting to look at these scripts. Because that's ultimately what we're talking about, are stories and these scripts. But when we're looking at these timelines, we all live in the real world. So none of us here are denying reality. At least not here in the IPS think tank. But what we are doing is we're recognizing that there's two distinct timelines, two versions that are parallel. One of them is the real thing, and the other one consists of the fake events that are superimposed over the real one. So we exist through the lens of media in the world where the two merge, real and fake, fiction and fact. Similar to, or rather, this was actually represented symbolically in 2001: A Space Odyssey, with the monolith and the sun and the moon converging over it. The sun representing, obviously, light, knowledge. The waking objective reality, the waking world, what we can see, touch, feel, measure. And then the moon represents the subconscious, the darkness, the stuff we don't see, or fiction, the imagination. And it represents the fusion of the two in a monolithic form where, I mean, it's merged into one. And the monolith, of course, has the same proportions as a movie screen. So the monolith, your black mirror iPhone, represents this fusion of these two timelines. And so we do, in fact, live in a hyper reality, which refers to this notion of the fiction has been so seamlessly merged with reality that you can no longer delineate between the two. And this is becoming increasingly true thanks to generative AI and the rapid evolution of hyper-realistic video. I mean, it's just getting so insane. Now, one thing too, and this is one of the major points that we've had to really hammer down on for some time, is that people noticing the two timelines. They'll notice the manipulation of the real world as it's represented by glitches or seeming glitches in the media. So what we call predictive programming used to be interpreted by people as evidence that we're in a simulation. I recall in 2024, late 2024, after Luigi Mangione shot the CEO, InfoWars did a story, Owen Schroyer in particular, about how it was evidence that we live in a simulation. And why is that? Well, because there's oftentimes some kind of entertainment counterpart to what's happening on the world stage at the same time. Now, we recognize this as a type of propaganda, that we're looking at this intentional creation of an echo chamber. We're looking at it as product placement for fake events. There are a lot of reasons. It's like advertising plus propaganda. There are reasonable explanations for what we call predictive programming. But if you don't recognize that there are two distinct timelines and that our real world is being manipulated with fakery, these things seem like glitches. They call them eerie coincidences, tragic coincidences, ironic coincidences, or evidence that nothing is real. So you're looking at the TV with the false presumption that everything on TV is real, and you see something glitchy, you're like, oh, reality's fake. That's the go-to response, or it used to be. Which is a win for the mind war. You're a mind war casualty at that point. If they've broken your mind to where you can no longer tell real from fake and you think that nothing's real because something you saw on TV, we're way past that. We're like, no, just because something on TV is fake doesn't mean reality's fake. It means the reality as portrayed on TV is being manipulated. We refer to this as news bending. Lying, essentially. You know, I saw something, I gotta find this though, on the etymology of witchcraft and Wicca, referring to, and this is according to Michael Hoffman, that it goes back to the word wicker, like a wicker basket. And he was talking about the Wicker Man, the 75 or something, 1977, the movie about the witch cult, and they build this large wicker man, you know, it's bendable wood, and they put their sacrifices in it and they burn it, like a big Burning Man. But he broke it down that the word wicker and Wicca, in terms of etymology, goes back to the term bending, like to bend, like bending reality, which is what lies do. They bend the reality, they warp the reality of the person who believes the lies. So mass media has been bending our version of reality forever, since inception. That is its purpose. Even if it's not overtly lying, the selectivity of what it presents represents a bending. They're synchronizing us in a version that eliminates more than it pro-offers. But now, looking at it long term, and this is what I'm getting at with the timelines and why this is a key concept, because the timeline that we're examining of fakery that has been superimposed over the real world timeline goes back so far that it's beyond bending a news cycle or a single lie. We're talking about bending history itself. Because what is history but a compilation of news? agreed upon lies. So again, history, news, and then future scheduled fake events, past, present, future. And as we enter this new year, and I brought this up on Fakeologist last night, we should recognize, before reacting to anything at all, that every single major scandal, terror attack, or fake event that we're going to experience in the next year has already been scheduled. It's already on the books. It's already got the actors. They're memorizing their lines. The people who are involved are signing their NDAs. Like everything we're about to experience as far as the major fake events, the historical events that are manufactured, yeah, those things are already going down. So no reason to act surprised. If you're acting surprised, it just shows that you're not in the know. I mean, you can be surprised or entertained in a sense, but I'm talking about the visceral emotional reaction should be entirely absent from those who know what's coming. But the normies who live in the now will always react. And they will react in predictable ways. But the alternative to reacting is responding. And a response, and you can look at this almost like a legal proceeding. Before you believe something, before something's judged to be true, there has to be a period of discovery. You don't make a snap judgment. We're not prejudiced. So you have a period where you have to acknowledge that there's a process here. So there's a discovery. Maybe you respond, but there's no snap judgments. We have to stick to the rules. What's up, Osher 06 Nama 66? Thanks for joining. Happy New Year. This is going to be a good one, though. Last year was great. I think last year was fantastic. We had a diverse array of psyops, all of them with the same template, same hallmarks. It was very educational. And I notice every year we have certain things that we advance, certain things we improve on, new terminology. I was happy to hear Mr. E, who's a, interesting channel. I'm not into his main topic that he used to be into. I'm not sure how deep he is in that, but a lot of his commentary is actually entertaining. And he uses the phrase concurrent programming, which is way more important than predictive, because predictive programming can be conveniently ignored by the mainstreamers. It can be derided as mere coincidence, cherry-picked, cognitive bias, selectivity bias, Texas sharpshooter fallacy. They have all kinds of things to hide behind. But when we're talking about the real-time alignment between news events that are deemed to be fake and the entertainment, you can't just ignore it so easily. And the specificity with which these things will mirror the real world, it would lead someone to think we're in a simulation if they didn't have a clue about this. And what's more is, as far as another consideration here, is that even if something is, released concurrent with the event, you have to account for the time that it took to produce that. So in other words, the occurrence of concurrent programming is evidence that the fake events, these staged historical events, are planned in advance. In other words, our history is being proactively created. And that's what the secondary timeline is. It's the implementation of the program on the world stage in full view of the public, so it's assimilated as real. It's how they augment our consensus. And the consensus is built on this model, this political horseshoe theory turned into a model with the two sides being triangulated against by the central authority. So we are making a point here that if you don't want to be in this merged timeline of real and fake, if you can see it, you can see the program, you have to step outside of their controlled dialectic. And the one thing I see holding back a lot of people is the hope that politics can save things, that you can vote like Trump's going to save the world. He's going to arrest all the deep state and solve all the conspiracies. Every time there's a government shutdown, conspiracy theorists will come out and they'll say, look, there's no chemtrails today. Oh, right, because the government's doing it with our tax money and they can't afford the stuff right now. As if that makes any sense. But it gives them this false hope that their voting matters. But if what we're saying is true, and it is. I'm saying if just because I'm open to the possibility that I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. Change my mind. But if we account for the proactive manufacturing of history, then a lot of what we assume to be true about the purpose of politics can just be scrapped. These things have to be rigged. And this became very clear in November with the election of that mayor and how it coincided with the death of Cheney and the narratives to follow. So what I'm thinking here is that politics is a form of entertainment, more or less. It's just more bread and circuses. I mean, there's local politics, obviously. There's actual government. But the political theater we see, these major historic events, like this thing with Venezuela right now, if these things are largely manufactured, if these events are pre-scheduled, then voting doesn't do anything. You're voting for participants in a play. You're voting for crisis actors who operate in the merged timelines. World stagers. I'm an off-world stager. I don't follow world stagers. I don't believe that, because they don't leave it. They don't leave that particular frame, that box. So in other words, voting is just a way to give the masses the illusion of control, when in fact this thing is going to move forward no matter what we do. The version of events as portrayed by the mainstream media does become the official history. They don't let our facts get in the way of their narratives. What we say will eventually be deleted, forgotten. Meanwhile, what is officially reported gets printed, gets memorized, and it gets built into people's worldviews. It gets reinforced endlessly because you got the predictive programming that sets you up for it, that shapes opinions, influences culture. Then you have the real-time echo chamber effect where they get everybody's reactions. But then from then on forward, every simulated staged fake event has its reality reinforced by endless conjecture, alternative theories. I mean, don't people ever get tired of hearing about the JFK conspiracy when no one has any real answer? It's just endless circles. But it's to reinforce you, to remind you, to embed the stuff. And there's this thing called the misinformation effect, where the more you recall something, the more you're altering the memory. And it will be altered by the context in which it is recalled. So if you're inundated with movies about terrorist attacks, and then a big terror attack happens, and then you think about the terror attack, your frame of reference actually includes the fiction. You have to decompartmentalize these various segments. Like this thing isn't really a bunch, like for example, entertainment and news media. I used to say there's no meaningful distinction between Hollywood and news. I used to say it facetiously, but then I realized, no, it's actually true. The purpose of news media is not to inform you because they care so much about you having the right information. No, the purpose of it is to conform you to a predetermined model. But anyway, all of this is going to be explained in a series of whiteboards as far as the big pictures, the two timelines, the world stage, history bending, the various types of programming, the programming timeline. These things will be put into also the concept of the meta-script and meta-scripters. But all of these are being put into a series of whiteboards that I'm going to use when I do my book reading and promotion throughout the rest of this year. So that's going to begin very soon. Again, I'm trying to make my way over to the library so I can print some labels and get this batch of books sent out. So I'm going to go in. Thanks for listening. We'll be live this evening, and I'm going to update the archives. I know I've been lagging for the last 24 hours. But I'll get those up as well as the talk with fakeologists last night. So if you go to ips.monster, it's a very simplified page and it has all the relevant links. All right, have a great day. We'll see you later.